Hey, happy Saturday morning, everybody. I hope your Saturday is going as well as mine is going. And my Saturday is just going to get better and better by and by. Just if plans work out all right, this is going to be the first Saturday that Bertie and Sir are going to have both William and Archie over at our house. So that's going to work out to be an incredible day. We're marking off these big events on our grandparent checklist. Now, of course, Archie's hooked up to a lot of stuff, so it's a production getting him around. But Haley's going to bring both the boys over. They're going to spend some time with us over here. And boy, we're getting close to their birthday. Today's the 13th of March. Their birthday is 10 days away. Looking forward just celebrating them. They are miracles. And I've been told this by a lot of people at the church because of all the prayers that have been lifted up for those two little guys. I've been told, hey, those are our babies. In a very real sense, they belong to everybody that's prayed them through this, prayed them through the past year. I'm going to pray them into the years to come. And I tell you what, I'm hoping that the next time I get to be on here with you, that I'll be able to show some great Birdie and Sir pictures with William and Archie. But listen, I've got to do something bad. I might make you jealous. The morning's starting out really well. Christy got a little bit extra early to be an extra big blessing before I came on here. So check it out. Oh, you folks from Louisiana and Southeast Texas know what this is. And this isn't the first one that's been consumed. This is probably the last one in the box. We got beignets, and they are delicious when they're hot, all covered in powdered sugar. You got to remove some. And at this place where we get beignets, it's the only place in town that I know of that keeps Cafe Du Monde coffee like on tap. Now, you just don't go drink Cafe Du Monde coffee. It is too potent. It needs to come with a warning label. It needs to say something like, this will affect you in a major way. So just be warned. But Cafe Du Monde coffee and beignets, they really go well together. So hey, I'm glad you're hanging out with me this morning. Man, I want to remind you while you're in here with me, and I want to thank Birdie for being such a good hostess of this online experience. Set your clocks properly tonight. Spring forward. Right now it's 8:04 according to the official timepiece that I'm wearing, right? 8:03 and a half. Really, this time tomorrow, when you look outside and it's about this kind of light outside, it's really going to be 9:04. So when you go to bed at 9 o'clock tonight, 10 o'clock tonight, if you go to bed at 9, it's really 10 o'clock at night. If you go to bed at 10, it's really 11 o'clock. If you go to bed at 11 o'clock, it's really midnight. So please set your clocks appropriately and wake up early enough that you can come and enjoy worship with us at 10:15 at First Baptist. It's great. It's great that we're in person, and it's great that our state has been opened up so that businesses and churches can do what's appropriate in their setting. What we're doing in our setting might not be appropriate for someone else in a different context, but we're doing what we can in our context. But no matter the context, the word, the message, the gospel is always consistent, is always true, is always beneficial, and it always leads us in the right direction. Now, if you are just catching this for the first time this week, let me tell you what we've done over the course of this week, Tuesday morning, Thursday night, and we're going to follow through this morning with it. we were looking at a sliver of passages in the book of Romans, chapter 3, passages that Paul uses. He quotes from the Psalms, and this is Romans 3. He starts in, the end of verse 10, goes down through verse 18. He's calling on the Psalms. He's using Isaiah. He's throwing in Ecclesiastes. He's bringing all of this evidence, all this scriptural evidence to support his message that all are guilty. But we looked at Thursday night, the psalm we looked at, the passage we looked at, the reference that Paul made to Psalm 5 proves to us that where guilt abounds, where we find ourselves as guilty as can be, convicted as charged, grace abounds even more, and that's good news for us. That's good news because, the more we live, the more guilt and shame and regret we build up, and the more we realize that we need God. Paul is writing from a position of strength when he's using the Old Testament passages to really get people focused on their need, their continual need for the grace of God. And the grace of God is the glory of God on display. It's the glory of God made manifest, made present, and accessible for our lives. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that. Now, the passage in Romans 3:18 that Paul chooses to use, where he says, there is no fear of God before their eyes, is a passage that comes from Psalm 36. It shows up in the first verse of the psalm, but as I reminded you Thursday and Tuesday, when the writers in the New Testament, when Paul is bringing up a passage from a psalm, he's not wanting just to cherry pick that little portion of that psalm and throw it into his broader argument. He chooses that selection from the psalm in order to highlight the entirety of the psalm. Now that's you might not find anybody else that would say that, but if you look at the psalm, I think it is self-evident. I think it comes across as a true witness to what Paul is seeking to accomplish, because Paul doesn't leave us in our guilt in Romans chapter 3. Paul's going to wind up telling us just exactly how God's grace covers our guilt, makes atonement, turns away the wrath of God from our sinfulness, our complicity in the fall of creation, in the fall of Adam and Eve. And now we're going to go back to Psalm 36 for a second, because in that first verse where it says about the wicked person, there's no fear of God before their eyes, the psalm is doing exactly what Paul's been doing in Romans 1, 2, and 3, condemning all mankind because all have sinned. He'll conclude by saying all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But this psalm starts out with that same argument, but listen to the verses, listen to the words from the middle of this psalm, and see if this might not be what Paul is wanting us to pick up on. He wants us to pick up what he's laying down. He's laid down that mankind is in need of God, and then he puts forward for us to pick up how good God is in comparison to our guilt, how good and glorious and gracious God is in comparison to what we've done. Now, this comes from Psalm 36, verses 5 through 9. And these are just beautiful words. They have been made into a contemporary song, so you'll probably recognize a little bit of this. In verse 5, it says, your love, Lord, reaches to the heavens, your faithfulness to the skies. Your righteousness is like the highest mountains, your justice like the great deep. You, Lord, preserve both people and animals. How priceless is your unfailing love, O God. People take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house. You give them drink from your river of delights, for with you is the fountain of life. In your light, we see light. Okay, boy, I tell you what, doesn't this just hit home on our need for God? but also the benefits, the blessings of having a relationship with God. Your love reaches to the highest heavens. You know, God's love, it can't be compared to anything we've experienced here on earth. And in this passage, it uses love, it uses faithfulness, it uses, in verse 7, unfailing love. Now, this is all characteristic of the Hebrew word for love, which is a difficult word to pronounce. You've got to say it. English speakers have a hard time saying these words from the back of their throat. It's a word hesed. It's actually a really hard H that comes from the back of the throat to the front of the mouth, and it describes God's covenantal loyalty. It describes the agape kind of love that we know about from the New Testament. Agape being the highest form of love expressed in the New Testament, the kind of love that Jesus shows us, the kind of love that gives itself, it sacrifices itself for the benefits of those that are recipients of that kind of love. You know, the psalm here is talking exactly about that kind of love. That kind of love is transformative. It takes us from being that person, that guilty person with no fear of the Lord in their eyes, and it transforms them into someone the Lord reaches down from heaven to pick up, to declare righteous, to clean off, to send on that straight and narrow path. He does it not because of our goodness, he does it because of his goodness. It's not maintained because of our merit, it's maintained because of his spirit. He accomplishes it and he follows through with it. And we are thankful. We as people are thankful for what he has accomplished through us. But just look at some of these metaphors. Your love reaches to the heavens. You know, who can describe God's love? It is beyond our comprehension. It reaches from earth beyond that which we can reach. Now, we've reached some pretty far and away things. You know, we've landed on the moon, we've sent rovers to Mars, but there's a lot more space. God's love is infinite. God's love has no boundaries. It is inexhaustible. You will never, ever, ever run out of your constant and present and powerful supply of God's love for you. It's just not possible. And his faithfulness is the same. It reaches to the skies. Your righteousness, you know, God's righteousness, his incorruptibility, his truth, his justice are in the same regard like the highest mountains or the greatest deep. You know, the deepest part in the ocean, the Marianas Trench. If you were to toss the highest mountain on earth into the deepest part of the ocean, there would still be, I think, a couple of miles of mountain underneath the ocean. But the highest peak on earth, Mount Everest, we're talking 29,000 feet. We're talking, something like 10,000 feet higher than any mountain in North America. This is the level that jet airplanes fly. People can't live at that level, and people cannot exist without an incredible amount of protection at the deepest part of the ocean. If you juxtapose those, the highest point on Earth where there's no oxygen, the deepest part of the oceans where there's no light and only crushing darkness, that span is miles and miles and miles. And God's faithfulness and his justice fill every inch of that. It goes beyond what we are capable of understanding or even imagining. God is righteous, just, faithful, and he uses his faithfulness to preserve his people. Isn't that beautiful? He uses his faithfulness to preserve his people. Don't you feel like you've been preserved over the past year? It was about a year ago this coming week, that everything shut down. And we were I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself. A little bit fearful. Didn't know what was going to happen next, and we had and then came baby issues, and then came storms, and it was like we never knew what was going to happen next. But we learned. I hope that we've all learned a good lesson over this past year that God is faithful. He preserves those that He loves. He preserves those who love Him through His faithfulness. You preserve both people and animals. So, how priceless is your hesed, your unfailing love, O Lord? We just can't put a number on it. We can't account for it. Our numbers, we can't add enough zeros to the number that we think it ought to be. It's by a factor of infinity more than what we could ever imagine. And I want to end with this last part because it's so beautiful, and I think it hits squarely on a passage that talks about something that was important to Christ and important to Jesus. It says, you give them drink from your river of delights, down here in verse 8. For with you is the fountain of life. Do you remember that story in John chapter 4 where Jesus had an encounter with a woman of Samaria at a well? And I've been to that well. I've drank water from that well. It's a pretty spectacular experience. But Jesus, having been exhausted, worn out, chose to sit by that well while the disciples went and got some food, got some lunch, got a snack. And while they were gone, a woman comes and Jesus says, woman, give me something to drink. And the woman takes issue with it. She says, how can you, a Jewish man, ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink of water? And Jesus said, if you knew who asked to ask for this drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. And she doesn't understand it. Of course, that's a little cryptic when you're just encountering a person for the first time and you don't know who they are, their background, where they're from, or who they are really. The woman looks at Jesus, says, you don't have anything to draw with. You don't have a rope. You don't have a cup. You don't have a bucket. And Jesus says that the water that I give will well up in a person into or to eternal life. That's what God offers us. When we come to God thirsty, God satisfies us. And God doesn't just give us, He's not the God of just enough. He's the God of the overflowing cup. He's the God of abundance. He's the God that satisfies not just our temporal curiosities about Him and for Him. He satisfies that need for our soul to be united with Him for all eternity. And that's what Paul is trying to get across through the book of Romans. How it is that sinful man can come close to a holy God, and it's not because of what they've done. They're guilty. Sinful mankind is guilty, but because of the grace of God, that's God's glory on display, He makes a way possible for us to know Him, to love Him, and to be with Him forever. And this fountain of life that Christ makes available to us is available instantly through faith. It's made available that moment that we believe. It's accessible as we call upon Him in prayer. It is for us forever. And, when we open our eyes to Christ by faith, it says, in your light, we see light. Everything else is darkness until we get our eyes on Jesus. We focus on the cross and what has been accomplished there. But once we settle our hearts by faith upon the cross and receive that which has been purchased for us on Calvary's cruel tree and given proof of by the resurrection that we're going to celebrate here in just a few weeks on Easter Sunday, when we get all that straight, even the darkness will turn to dawning, because when we get Christ in perspective in our minds and in our life and in our heart, everything else falls into place. It all starts to make sense, because in His light, everything becomes light. So I hope you have that kind of a Saturday where you have the perspective to see God. You can thank God for what He's done. You can commit yourself to what God wants to do through you because He has unshackled you through faith from the condemnation that we so justly deserve coming into this world and leaving this world where we will truly enjoy that ultimate liberation, that salvation in its fullness that He purchased for us. So, friends, hey, I hope you have a great Saturday. Hope your Saturday is starting out as well as mine with a beignet and a cup of Cafe Du Monde coffee. But if not, I hope you can make it the best Saturday possible. But I know how you can have a greater Sunday. Set your clocks forward tonight. Wake up in plenty of time. Join us at First Baptist Nederland, 10:15 online or in person, and we're going to have a great time together. Hey, y'all have a wonderful day. God bless y'all.